Part of me wants to just back out.
You're crazy. Why the hell would you want to back out?
Catelynn and Tyler were only teenagers when they made the brave choice to place their baby for adoption. Since then, the couple has struggled with the dark truth behind the adoption process in ways that are going to leave you shocked. When teen mom favorites Catelynn Lowell and Tyler Bolterra got pregnant at just 16 years old, they knew they weren't ready to be parents. They both had seriously unstable home lives, which only got worse when Catelyn's mom, April, married Tyler's dad, Butch. Because of April and Butch's substance use and overall lack of care for their kids, Catelynn and Tyler had to make a heart-wrenching decision. Their choice to place their baby for adoption was insanely tough for them in the first place, but their parents made it even more challenging. April and Butch threatened and verbally attacked Catelynn and Tyler for their decision. I couldn't believe it when April started bringing home baby clothes to try to get Catelynn to change her mind, but when it came down to the actual adoption process, that's where things got even crazier. Because their parents weren't on board with the adoption, Tyler and Catelynn obviously couldn't ask them for help with how to go about the process. I can't imagine how lost they must have felt, especially with understanding the legal aspects of adoption. But after they met with Dawn, a counselor at an adoption agency, she gave them some seriously bizarre information. Catelynn and Tyler didn't have many stable and supportive adults in their lives, so Dawn's guidance was basically all they had. I think because Tyler and Catelynn were so young and naive, they really trusted Dawn and felt like she was looking out for their best interests. But after she helped the kids meet with a couple who was interested in adopting their baby, a very shady side of the adoption was exposed. When Catelynn, Tyler, and Dawn met with Brandon and Teresa Davis, they all seemed to agree on what they hoped the adoption to be like. I was honestly surprised that Brandon and Teresa acted totally fine with meeting all of the expectations that Catelynn and Tyler had for their semi-open adoption. What seemed even more outrageous though was how everything changed so drastically. Tyler and Catelynn felt like everything with Brandon and Teresa made sense, and they were set on them being the adoptive parents. But after their baby girl, Carly, was born and the adoption was finalized, not everything went as planned. I don't think Tyler and Catelynn had any clue whatsoever that their relationship with Brandon and Teresa would turn into such a roller coaster of emotions. At first, from what Dawn had explained, Tyler and Catelynn were completely in control of their adoption plan. I'm sure that's why they believed the Davises when they originally agreed to everything. Catelynn and Tyler were expecting to be able to have yearly visits with Carly, send her birthday and Christmas presents, and get lots of picture updates on her. But what actually happened was honestly unbelievable. Catelynn and Tyler's first yearly meeting with Carly and her adoptive parents went over as well as it probably could have. The teens were struggling with grief of not raising their daughter, so their visit left them feeling understandably emotional. I can't imagine how tough it must have been for Catelynn and Tyler to say goodbye to Carly, especially because of the insane boundaries that Tyler's mom crossed not long after. Everything between both sets of Carly's parents was about to change forever. A few months after Tyler and Catelynn had their first visit with Carly, Tyler's mom, Kim, did something shocking. The teenagers had been talking about how nice it would be if Carly and her adoptive parents could make it to their high school graduation. But I could barely believe it when it was revealed that Kim had invited the Davises to Tyler and Catelyn's graduation in secret. It turns out Kim had broken the adoption agreement in an absolutely unreal way. The adoption contract had stated that all communication was supposed to go through Dawn at the adoption agency. Tyler and Catelynn were allowed to contact Brandon and Teresa occasionally over the phone, but they didn't even know the family's last name or address at first. When Kim somehow found out Brandon and Teresa's number and called them herself, they were completely blown away. I don't really blame them for feeling uneasy about Kim's lack of boundaries. Unsurprisingly, they didn't make the 700-mile trip to Tyler and Catelyn's graduation. I don't think Kim's phone call was the only reason why a rift happened between them, but I'm sure it didn't help. Shortly after, the Davises revealed why their semi-open adoption was becoming difficult for them, and you're never going to believe what the reason was. In 2012, Brandon and Teresa, along with Carly and her newly adopted brother, were featured on the cover of one of the adoption agency's magazines. In the article, they talked about how having their adoption with Catelynn and Tyler being so public because of Teen Mom was a struggle. I bet none of them had any clue that the series would be so popular and be on the air for so long, but apparently the spotlight was causing some problems that were seriously unthinkable. The Davises admitted that they had watched some episodes of Teen Mom. They said that seeing how much Catelynn and Tyler were still struggling to cope with their adoption decision was really difficult. As sad as I'm sure it was to watch that play out on TV, it started to become clear that it wasn't the only issue Brandon and Teresa had with their story being in the public eye. What happened next was outrageous. Tyler and Catelynn started noticing that the adoption wasn't quite as open as they originally planned it to be. After a couple more visits with Carly, they realized that Brandon and Teresa had started to pull back communication quite a lot. I understand that was really hurtful and frustrating for Catelynn and Tyler, but the way they started acting was honestly insane. Teresa and Brandon reached out to Catelynn and Tyler to ask them to stop posting pictures of Carly on social media. I get why they did that, and I don't think they were being unreasonable for not wanting pictures they had sent of Carly to end up online. While it's true that the Davises knew cameras were rolling ever since the adoption first happened, they had every right to create boundaries to keep Carly safe. Brandon and Teresa's request was really just to respect the fact that they wanted Carly to have a more private life. With how popular Teen Mom was, I'm sure they didn't want to risk Carly being recognized in public all the time. But apparently Tyler didn't agree with what they wanted, and he made it crystal clear. It's crazy to me how quickly everything started falling apart. In an episode of Teen Mom, Catelynn and Tyler both revealed how annoying they thought it was they weren't allowed to post pictures of Carly's face. I think Catelynn started to realize that their relationship with the Davises was more important than sharing pictures of Carly on social media. But Tyler refused to follow Brandon and Teresa's rules, and he posted another photo of Carly to his Instagram. Needless to say, that was a huge turning point. Brandon and Teresa gave Catelynn and Tyler a shocking ultimatum. If they couldn't respect the rules of Carly's pictures, all contact would be completely over and the adoption would be closed. I can't believe that Tyler's stubbornness had created so much tension, but when the couples met up to try to smooth things over, they discovered there were far deeper problems than they realized. When Catelynn and Tyler met with the Davises, it was clear that they did not see eye to eye. At one point, Teresa even reminded Tyler that she and Brandon were in charge of making choices for Carly, not him. I will say that as much as I think Tyler and Catelynn were misled and pressured by Dawn, Brandon, and Teresa into going forward with the adoption, it was still wrong of Tyler to act like he had parental rights. Either way, I was really surprised that Catelynn, Tyler, and the Davises eventually came to somewhat of an understanding about Carly's face not being shown on TV anymore. The call for peace was just in time. So many big changes were going on for both of the families, and what happened next was unbelievable. In 2015, Tyler and Catelynn not only welcomed another daughter, Nova, but they got married as well. I was honestly shocked that the Davises attended the wedding. Teresa even helped Catelynn get ready to walk down the aisle. But after the wedding episode aired, a lot of people noticed something kind of weird about Brandon and Teresa's behavior. This is pretty crazy. When Tyler and Catelynn had their first dance at the reception, they asked Brandon and Teresa for permission to have Carly join them. Surprisingly, they agreed, and it was such a powerful and emotional moment to see Tyler holding Carly on the dance floor. But instead of letting Tyler and Catelynn have their own short dance with their birth daughter, Brandon and Teresa made the situation kind of awkward. The Davises followed Tyler, Catelynn, and Carly while they were dancing and hovered right next to them. I don't know if they were normally that protective, but it almost seemed like they were worried Catelynn and Tyler would try to run off with Carly. Either way, Tyler claimed that it was the best time of his life, and they all seemed to be getting along for a change. That's why it was seriously unexpected to hear what Catelynn and Tyler were dealing with next. The following year, Teresa asked Tyler and Catelynn to stop filming about any conversations that she had with them. This seemed to come as a surprise to Catelynn and Tyler, and obviously Tyler had to make a fuss about it. But even if Brandon and Teresa had been frustrated for some reason, the way they started to behave was really odd. Catelynn and Tyler stopped getting their yearly visits with Carly, but that wasn't all the Davises had changed. Apparently, Catelynn wasn't even getting communication from Teresa anymore. I couldn't believe it when she told Dawn that Teresa would go months without responding to a text she'd sent. But as crazy as that seemed, Dawn's response was even more bizarre. According to Dawn, the adoption agreement that Catelynn and Tyler had signed when they were 16 years old stated that the Davises were allowed to end visits completely. Tyler and Catelynn were crushed that the contract they hadn't even fully understood when they signed it as children was being brought up against them. I don't blame Catelynn and Tyler for being disappointed, but that feeling quickly took a sharp turn for the worst. After Tyler and Catelynn realized that their minimal contact with Carly would end if the Davises made that decision, they were terrified. They thought that since everyone had agreed everything when the adoption was arranged, it would continue to be at least somewhat open. Since then, communication between the couples has been complicated. But thankfully, Catelynn and Tyler got some surprisingly good news last year. Brandon, Teresa, and Carly were able to visit with Catelynn, Tyler, and their daughters Nova and Vita in May 2021. But I don't think Catelynn and Tyler should get their hopes up anytime soon. Just recently in an episode of Teen Mom, The Next Chapter, Catelynn asked the Davises to arrange another meeting so that Carly could meet her newest sister, Raya. Unfortunately, Teresa said that the timing wasn't going to work. I think from here on out, Catelynn and Tyler are probably going to have to accept whatever visits the Davises are able to commit to. It's so sad that the relationship between the couples went from being so hopeful and strong to completely unpredictable. I feel like both of their perspectives make sense in some aspect though. Catelynn and Tyler were pressured and misled when it came to the adoption agency's contract for Brandon and Teresa to adopt Carly, and Brandon and Teresa are responsible for protecting Carly and keeping her well-being a priority. priority. So it's honestly kind of hard to fully side with just one couple. But what do you guys think? Is there a side that you agree with more? What are your thoughts on how the adoptions changed so much over time? Let me know in the comments.